School Committee meeting of Wednesday, September 14th, 2022. My name is Lindsay Heffernan, and I'm the chair of the school committee. As we start the school year, I'd like to again thank Shrewsbury Media Connection for making this broadcast public, both live stream on their website and on Selco channels 29 and 329. But before we begin this evening, I would like to start by asking those present and those at home to join us in a moment of silence to honor our Mandarin Chinese teacher, Ms. Chenwei Yau, who unexpectedly passed away after a brief illness this summer. She was a beloved member of our community, a longtime resident in this town, and as I have learned, quite loved by her students and her colleagues, and in fact really endeavored and lived out the best of our educators in helping other educators be better teachers. So if I can ask everyone to please join me in a moment of silence. Thank you. And before we move on with our program this evening, I would, Dr. Sawyer, like to offer the opportunity for you to make any comments you would like to.
Thank you very much. Chenwei Yau was not only a superb Mandarin Chinese teacher, she was a wonderful human being. I want to again convey my condolences to her family and all who knew and worked with her, our students and staff at Sherwood Oak and Shrewsbury High School, where she taught most recently. As I shared with the staff when the school year opened, I think we can all be inspired by Chenwei's example. She really epitomized the ideals of our profession of education, especially continuous learning, in order to better serve her students and her colleagues. As a matter of fact, her family provided a card at her memorial service that captured the sentiment with Chenwei's own beautiful calligraphy and artwork, with the phrase illustrated, "May your lives continue on and your learning never cease." She worked tirelessly to provide authentic world language experiences for her students that were aligned with current best practices. She taught other Mandarin teachers through workshops, served as an officer in both her state and national professional associations. In fact, she was a towering figure among her fellow Mandarin Chinese teachers during the pandemic, in particular, when she was president of the National Chinese Teachers Association when COVID-19 hit in 2020, and spent countless hours working with her colleagues from across the nation on how to effectively shift instruction to an online mode during that time. I also wanted to let the community know that because Chenwei was the model of a truly professional educator, we felt it was fitting to honor her memory both this year and in an ongoing way by naming one of the annual Superintendent's Awards given to staff after her. The Chenwei Yau Award will recognize an educator for outstanding dedication to students, colleagues, and the education profession by going above and beyond to provide excellent educational experiences for students, professional development to fellow educators, and contributions for the collective good of our profession. And I did announce on opening day that the first recipient of that award was Mr. Kenneth Almeida, who is the director of the World Language Department, a longtime colleague of Chenwei's, and who certainly models those ideals. So again, our condolences to everyone that Chenwei knew, and her family especially. We remain heartbroken, but we will be inspired by her example. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sawyer. And turning to this evening, we are quite fortunate, I will say, to have a group of students in front of us this evening with Mr. Lamparmardo to help welcome us and start our year. I understand this is our chamber choir, am I correct on that? And they'll be performing the Star Spangled Banner, so I thank you.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the
Sure.
Thank you all so very much for joining us this evening. It's wonderful to start the year back with students right with us. And I know, Dr. Sawyer, we have many students with us. If either you or their teacher would like to make sure we acknowledge who's here with us. Thank you for being here.
I have their names, so I'll go ahead and do that first. Thanks to Mr. Lapamardo, longtime director. And these are the artists formerly known as the a cappella choir. But now that they are having a little bit of accompaniment now and then, the name has been changed to the chamber choir. They always do an amazing job, and we appreciate you coming to this evening. This evening we had with us our sopranos were Grace Caston, Rebecca Powers, Mary Jane Pratt, and Elaine Stamaris. The altos are Kira Fitch, Rachel Harvey, Aaliyah Hatham, and Gianna Tan. The tenor were Chase Kinski, Kenneth Wen, and Carter Siebels, and the bass, Carlos Reyes and Arjun Warrior. So we appreciate you all taking your time on a busy school night to come out and share your talents with us and start off our school committee, new school committee year in such a great way. So thank you very much, and we're looking forward to other performances coming up. When's the fall concert, Mr. Lapamardo?
October 13th.
All right, so anyone, and that's certainly anyone in the community is welcome to join. They'll be selling some, our annual ticket drive is coming up, is that correct?
Just happened. So
Just
at the
happened,
door.
all right. So if you need to come to the door on October 13th and hear them, as well as our orchestra and band, we have an amazing performing arts department, and we're just amazed every year about what our students do. So thanks for spending time with us this evening. You don't have to stick around. You can go do what you need to do as much as you might like to. So again, thank you so much for having us.
And thank you for being with us this evening, Mr. Lapamardo. I want you to know I bought my tickets over the last weekend from one of your colleagues at the high school. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Good night. Okay. So the first item on our agenda is public participation. For public participation, I would note that those who wish to address the committee may do so by contacting the chair in advance of the meeting. Per our policy, members have up to 3 minutes to address the committee on items that may be before us, and we ask that any individuals introduce themselves, share their name and address for the record, and any affiliations that we have. And we do have one member of the public tonight, Ms. Patricia Minton, who I would welcome to the microphone to participate. Thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you for having me. My name is Patricia Minton. I reside at 3 Partridge Hill Road in Shrewsbury. My name is Patricia Minton, and I have been a resident of Shrewsbury for over 20 years with my husband and 2 girls at Shrewsbury High. One of the reasons my husband chose Shrewsbury for our home, even before I met him, was for the schools. As you know, no 2 kids are alike, and that's the same for my family. My youngest is now a freshman in Shrewsbury High School. Every kid is their own person, and it is true for my youngest daughter. My youngest is bright, cheerful, and imaginative. However, she is not the typical student. She has an IEP due to her ADHD. I am sure that there are other families in Shrewsbury with a similar dynamic. In the past, many children who weren't typical Shrewsbury student had the opportunity to apply at Assabet Regional Technical School. Unfortunately, the DESE in 2021 passed a new guideline for admission to vocational schools. This has left many Shrewsbury students without an option aside from Shrewsbury High. For atypical students, such as my daughter, this was extremely disappointing. My question for the committee is this. When the town learned at the start of 2021 of the legislation that was going to in effect this past year, why didn't the town seek alternative opportunities for students looking for vocational schools, especially these atypical students that may benefit the most? I have called Senator Moore, Representative Kane, and the governor's office. Senator Moore and Representative Kane called me and shared that they have had meetings with the superintendent and the school committee, but no solid plans for further information was available. Separately, I did learn that Assistant Superintendent Lizotte had published that she was looking for businesses who were interested in cooperative opportunities. While not the perfect solution, it would have been a positive step. Sadly, nothing has come of it as far as I know. In my quest to help assistance, I spoke with Marie Jane, supervisor of the Office for College, Career, and Technical Education. She shared information on innovative pathways. This is part of the Massachusetts High Quality College and Career Pathways Initiative. Launched in 2017, innovation pathways are designed to create strong partnerships with employees to expose students to career options and help them develop knowledge and skills related to a particular field before they graduate high school. Marie Jane would welcome additional inquiries to her office. In summary, Shrewsbury needs to find a way to help these students who may not pursue the typical college path. I would ask the committee to consider all options to help our kids in this area, including but not limited to taking steps necessary to join the district ask for access for Assabet Regional Technical High School, the pursuit of options such as innovative pathways by reaching out to Marie Jane, supervisor of the Office for College, Career, and Technical Education. Thank you for your time and opportunity for me to speak here tonight. I truly hope Shrewsbury can develop a plan to assist our students with the skills needed to be successful adults.
Thank you, Ms. Minton, for your comments. I know I can speak on behalf of the committee to say we are all concerned about the issue, and we'll be addressing it a little later this evening as well. Next on our agenda is chairperson or members' reports. Do any of my colleagues have anything they'd like to add? Yep. All right. Other than having a wonderful start to the school year in my family, I think I can turn it over to the superintendent's report. Please, Dr. Sawyer.
Thank you. And in lieu of the traditional superintendent's report, since I'll be reporting at the start on the opening of the school year, I'll just dispense with that if that's okay. And move right into our presentation. And I'm going to try to mirror here. I think Mr. Collins is mirroring his screen at the moment, but let me see if I can.
Sure, can you bump that out, or do I need to?
You might need to exit first.
There we go.
There we go. All right.
It's remarkably easy.
All right, thank you. I'm pleased to be able to share with the community some information about the opening of the 2022-2023 school year, which has been a very positive opening to the school year. I'm very pleased to report that. There's a few themes I will touch on this evening. First off, we definitely have had an excellent start to the new school year. The emotional climate in all of our schools is very positive, and that's been reinforced with multiple conversations with staff, principals, students over the course of visiting our schools over the past couple of weeks. Our focus right now is on building a sense of belonging, ensuring our focus on students' well-being, as well as, of course, our primary reason for existence, and that's student learning. And that there are many challenges ahead, for sure, but many opportunities as well. I wanted to start with this quotation that I shared with our district leadership team at our annual full-day workshop in August from Simon Sinek, who writes about organizational and business leadership, and his emphasis on starting with the idea of why. Why does an organization exist? What is the core reason? Of course, when someone says, why should anyone care? As far as I'm concerned, there's no organization in the community of Shrewsbury that's more important than our schools, and our community cares deeply about them, and that's something that is pervasive across whether that's families, students, staff. We've developed our whys over time. Our school district's mission was put in place over 25 years ago at this point. That we partner with the community to provide students with the skills they need for success in the 21st century. An appreciation of our democratic tradition, which for me is making sure they're equipped to be active and engaged citizens, and the desire to continue to learn throughout life, which also means giving them the tools to be able to continuously learn throughout their time, even after they leave us in their K-12 or pre-K-12 education. Our core values were developed some number of years after our mission. We refer to them constantly in the work that we do. We go over this with all of our new hires in detail. There's more detail about this on our website, of course, but the 4 broad areas of respect and responsibility, collaboration and communication, our commitment to high standards and expectations, and equity are all something that we take into account when we're doing our work and we're planning. Our vision for our students was developed more recently in 2017. There was a study group that met for about a year, about 30 people. About half were educators from across the district in different roles, and about half were parents from a variety of professions and work backgrounds, to answer the question of what our vision was for our students by the time they graduated from Shrewsbury High School. These are the 6 major areas they came up with that are certainly important and are guiding our work and have been guiding our work since this was adopted by the school committee in 2018. Both critical thinking and mastering content, innovation, especially in the sense of thinking creatively in a world where robotics and artificial intelligence take up more and more of what used to be the work that people would do. How do we bring that human element to things in the design process, in creative thinking? Resilience and focus, this was adapted, of course, or adopted before the pandemic, more important than ever. How do we teach our students and give them a skill set for the inevitable times when things don't go their way? How do we help them in a world where everyone has a distraction machine in their pockets to maintain their focus and to be able to move forward with the things they're trying to do as far as their learning and their work? Collaboration and communication, right from our core values, but teaching our kids to be team players, to teach them to be effective communicators, whether that's in writing, verbally, visually. Global citizenship and engagement. Not only do we want our students to understand their local and state and national context, but how is it that things are certainly in a world that continues to shrink metaphorically, understand the global context of what they're learning. And then finally, leadership, which I think for the study group was probably maybe debated the most among these, with some concern about whether it was putting undue pressure that every student to be a leader, but ultimately the group defined it as not a position, not the captain of the team or the student council representative, but more an action, and that any time you influence someone else's success, you're exhibiting leadership, and how can we give our kids the tools to positively influence others is something that's important to us. So these are the whys that we've developed and we've worked with for some time. Another quote from Mr. Sinek is that when you lead with why, people can inspire you, or organizations that do this and people who do this inspire you by making people feel safe and not alone and giving them a sense of belonging. And for me, this is what our educators in Shrewsbury do. They make our students feel like they belong. They make them feel special, safe, not alone. And as a result, they're able to influence them and inspire them as educators, and that's why our schools are what they are, is because of the people who make them great. I just want to share a few photos from the first couple of weeks of school. That's a first day of kindergarten student at Floral Street School on the left. That's a 4th grade class, Mrs. Moran's 4th grade class at Patton School on the right. A classroom at Beale on this slide, giving their thumbs up, as well as a classroom at Parker Road Preschool with some students doing some reading along with their teacher. These slides are from Shrewsbury High School, the junior class, meeting with their grade level administrator, assistant principal Maureen Monopoly, going over the core values of Shrewsbury High School, which are espoused in the acronym LEADER. And that's a phys ed class at Sherwood Middle School, getting ready to build their strength over the course of their phys ed program this year. But lots of smiles, a lot of real enthusiasm and positive energy in the buildings. I also want to share with the community that on opening day, we had the great fortune to have Siri Ural, who is in the class of 2024, who is the national runner-up in speech and debate in impromptu speaking. Siri showed our entire staff of 1,000 plus people what that means, because I gave her 3 different quotes, 5 minutes, and 5 minutes to prepare while we talked about a couple of other things, and then she delivered a 5-minute speech that she had developed literally impromptu on the topic of student belonging in the school community, and she was marvelous. And so that was a wonderful way just to kick off our school year with our staff, and really hearing from a student voice that of course is incredibly impressive. I also was very pleased to be able to give the annual Superintendent's Awards to the folks who are pictured in this slide. From left to right, Amy Russell, who's a paraprofessional applied behavior analysis technician at Sherwood Middle School. This is also the back row, Charlene Costello, who is a kindergarten teacher at Beale. Also, Kenneth Almeida, who I mentioned before, was the first recipient of the Chenwei Yau Award. He's the Director of World Languages for the district. A goofy tall guy who got into the picture somehow with the very short haircut. Liza Tremblay, who is the Director of English at Shrewsbury High School, who was the recipient of the Jane Wilkin Award, named after the retired former principal of Patton School. Someone who's in the room with us this evening, Patrick Collins, who's our Assistant Superintendent for Finance and Operations. Sue Shea, this is the front row now from left to right, Sue is a child-specific aide at Patton School. Linda Weir, who's a child-specific aide at Coolidge School. In the center, Noelle Freeman, who you all got to know more than you wanted to over the past few years, our Director of School Nursing, who received an award that's named after Tom Kennedy, the former Director of Human Resources. Betsy Caforio, who is a teacher at Floral Street School, longtime teacher there since its opening, and as a matter of fact, I was at Coolidge before that for a few years. And then finally, last but not least, Erin Kennedy, who is the team chair at Sherwood Middle School. And although I could give out dozens upon dozens of these awards for extraordinary performance and commitment, tried to select a group of folks who really represent our core values, and these folks certainly do. As we mentioned earlier and had the moment of silence, we were so sad to lose our colleague Chenwei Yau, and we recognized her appropriately at opening day as well. As far as challenges at the start of the school year, we are still coping with the paraprofessional staffing shortage. It's improved since the late summer. We appreciate some of the communications we've been doing and the really hard work that the special education leadership team and our human resources department have been doing to source as many candidates as they can. We still have 24 positions to fill across the district. It's typically 1 or 2 positions in each of our schools. I think there are 5 right now at the high school, though for 3 of those students are not in need of those services right now. But it's something we continue to work on, and but based on the flow right now of applicants is greater than it was in late August, we're expecting to hopefully be fully staffed over the next few weeks. But we do appreciate that it does create difficulties in terms of the support that we're trying to provide to our students and to our educators. We did have some isolated issues with some bus routing. We had some issues working around the road construction up around Wachusett Circle in that part of town. We also had a software glitch with some routing around our special education transportation that we found out about at the last minute, and we were able to rectify, but it took a few days to do that, and we apologize. So those are things that we're working through, and if we have a glitch, the goal, of course, is not to have that repeat in the future. Once we recognize what the issue was. We have had a significant enrollment of students with English language learning needs, particularly at the elementary level. In talking with Christina Manos, who's the director of the English language education department, we're about 50% higher in our enrollment right now with elementary English language students than we were at this time last year. We'll have to see if that levels off or if that continues in terms of an inflow. Right now, it's a very heavy lift for our ESL teachers to complete the required assessments for language proficiency. We really appreciate the efforts they're putting in, and we'll have, when we do our student enrollment reports a little bit later this fall, we'll have very specifics on that based on the October 1st numbers that the state uses each year to measure year-over-year populations. And then finally, we had some really hot weather the first week of school, and just to remind people that about half of our buildings are not climate controlled, and so we had to make some adjustments at times, trying to get some classrooms off of the top floor at Coolidge, which gets very hot, into some cooler spaces in the building, or in the afternoon moving them around. It's just, given it was the first couple of days of school, I think people were good-humored about it as much as they could be, but this continues to be an issue that Mr. Collins and I were working with public buildings on. Obviously, we're looking for a long-term solution around all of our schools becoming climate controlled at some point. That's obviously a process that's going to take place over a number of years. We're looking at other short-term solutions we might be able to have for these hotter days, especially as with climate change, we expect they're going to become more prevalent at the start and the end of the school year. Knock on wood, it's been pretty good since the first week of school, but it can get very uncomfortable in parts of our buildings, especially on the top floors. An ongoing challenge, of course, that all schools face in this time in our society is school safety and security. I want to reassure the community that we continue to pay a great deal of attention to this issue. Mr. Collins and I had our yearly meeting that's required with the police and fire chief, and we have an excellent working relationship with public safety here in our community that helps us work well around these various issues. We are updating to the latest version of the standard response protocol, which is the approach protocol we use for emergency response. We have already gone through our required fire drills, which are required by state law to happen at the start of the school year. Our schools are in the process, and most of our schools at this point, I would say, have had lockdown drills, and we're utilizing the technology we put into place a couple of years ago, the automated lockdown announcements that happen over our PA system and that automatically notify law enforcement as well as school and district leaders if someone were to actually press the button that we needed to go into a lockdown situation. And over the course of the year, we'll have other kinds of drills around severe weather and other things that we may have to cope with. And our principals, assistant principals, and our educators have done an excellent job working with our students in an age-appropriate way to try to make sure that we are drilling in order to be as prepared as we reasonably can be, while at the same time trying not to provoke too much anxiety within our students and young people, because that's understandable given some of the events that have happened over the past year and the Uvalde school shooting in particular. Let me shift gears a minute to some real successes, I think. I want to commend everyone who does hiring of professional level educators for the district across our leadership team in our human resources department, and particularly Barb Malone, our executive director of human resources. We were 99+% staff for professional educators when we started the school year, and that definitely is not the case everywhere. We are in a very, very strong position when it came to teachers being on board and ready, even with some late summer resignations. Thanks to our partners at AA Transportation, we have a minimal shortage of bus drivers. We're like 1 or 2 positions short, I believe, Mr. Collins, and I know some of the managers have been driving routes themselves to adjust for that. But I'm sure people have seen in the media stories about other areas with different bus vendors where there are really significant staffing shortages among bus drivers that are creating the need to not be able to provide transportation to everybody in a school district in some cases, or changing routes or longer routes. So we're very fortunate that we're in a strong position, and again, we really appreciate the work that AA Transportation did to make sure their staffing was adequate to start our school year. Our facilities cleaning and maintenance was very well done. You're going to hear a very specific report about that in a few minutes. But our schools looked great. We did a lot of maintenance projects over the summer. You'll hear all about those. Again, we have a wonderful relationship with our Public Buildings Division, and appreciate the work that our custodians and maintenance craftsmen do throughout the summer and throughout the year to keep our schools looking good. Just as an aside, it continues to happen that when people talk about visiting Floral Street School or Shrewsbury High School, and they're, well, so when was that school built? When was that high school built? About 5 years old now? So, no, it's actually 20 years old. It was well built and it's been well maintained. Floral Street School now is over 25 years old. It's its 26th year this year. We really appreciate the way that we've been able to care for these facilities, as well as to do the work on the older facilities to keep them moving. And I know that's been a lot of attention paid and much later this fall, probably in mid to late November, we will have a pre-K to 12 facility study that's been commissioned. That was part of the Beal project that Lamoureux Pagano Associates are going to be presenting with long-term, short and long-term recommendations around capital investment in our school facilities. I just want to commend again our staff, their engagement with their opening meetings of the year, our first professional development day, which was the Friday of the first week of school. They're all in around doing what they need to do to make this a successful school year for our students, and their professionalism continues to impress me all the time. And then finally, really happy and engaged students and families. This has been one of the best school openings in my career as a school administrator in Shrewsbury. And in contrast to the last few years in particular. But even despite that, it's been a really smooth opening overall, and there's just a real positive sense of things out in the schools. I do want to just let those watching know, we did welcome on opening day our new leadership team members. Ms. Hallie Burax, the new principal at Oak Middle School. Ms. Jamie Millett is our new Director of Counseling and Mental Health Services. That's a new position that was added to the budget, much needed, and coordinating all that work across the district. Dr. Scott Mulcahy is the new principal at the Walter J. Patton School. And then Ms. Lindsay Stashowski, who was hired last spring as our Human Resources Manager after a reorganization in that department. When we had a position leave, we were able to shift a position into a Human Resources Manager position. And Ms. April Yu is our Assistant Finance and Operations Manager, who's been with us for more than a year, but those positions, as we've elevated those to being part of our district leadership team as well. And we'll do a full report on all of our new staffing. Ms. Malone will present that in 2 weeks at your next school committee meeting. So just to wrap up, in addition to our why, we're certainly focused on the what. And 5 years ago, almost, the school committee adopted these 4 strategic priorities. And there's been a great deal of work that's been done successfully in these 4 areas. And of course, there's goals under each of them, whether that's space and resources to support effective learning. 5 years ago, we did not have budget stability, and we did not have a new elementary school. And both of those were major, major things in terms of the operational override to provide us with that budget stability and resources we needed. And the new Beal School solving not only the issue of the older school in the center of town, but also solving our space issues at the elementary level. We're hugely improved compared to where we were in 2018 when that was put together. Connected learning for a complex world, a focus on trying to create more project-based and hands-on and real-world kinds of learning experiences. We made some progress with that. Some has been interrupted by the pandemic. And when we speak a little bit later about our work around vocational and technical education, we'll refer to that as well. There was some things there about using technology. Boy, did we go far beyond where we ever thought we'd go with technology when we put this plan together, because we were forced to. But and I think we were well positioned to do that because of some of the preliminary work we had done. Learning environments where everyone's success matters, really a focus on inclusivity. Making sure all students feel a sense of belonging for who they are, unconditionally accepted for who they are, and included, and where everyone has an opportunity for success is something that we've done some great work on, and we'll be reporting more on these as we get closer and go through our strategic planning process. And finally, the enhanced well-being of all. Even before the pandemic, we were very concerned about rising rates of student issues with mental health and social and emotional well-being, and the pandemic has only exacerbated that. We've brought a lot of resources on board. We've moved and done a lot of good work in this area, but there's no question that we have to continue to focus on this to make sure that we're paying attention and intervening and providing, being proactive as best we can to make sure all of our students are experiencing a sense of well-being to the greatest extent we possibly can. So the question we have, and we'll be addressing this fall, is what are we going to be doing for the next 5 years? And so those watching, please look for opportunities this fall. There'll be an online exchange that'll be launched later this week with our parent community, and we'll be doing one with our staff and our students as well. And we'll be doing a series of those over the coming months as we engage with the process to create the school district's priorities for the next 5 years. So again, just wrap up by indicating we've had an excellent start. We have a very positive emotional climate right now overall in our schools. We're very focused on student belonging, well-being, and their learning, and we are looking forward to the opportunities and challenges that lie ahead with this school year. And with that, we're looking forward to a great year, and I'm happy to hear any comments or answer any questions the committee has.
Thank you, Dr. Sawyer. Any comments or questions from my colleagues? And just one question, Dr. Sawyer. The increased number of English language learners. I know we talked about that during the last budget cycle. Is it a a point of a need that is so great that we have to rethink staffing and bring in some more staff in that particular area?
It's possible, don't know the answer to that yet. We're required, not only by good practice, but by state law, that we assess students to find out what level
Okay.
they're at in terms of whether it's a student who has literally no English at all, or may have some working English or some academic English. And once the ESL teachers have completed those, we'll have a better idea of whether or not we're going to need to add staffing. Fortunately, we did add a full-time teacher that was likely going to be split between Beale and Coolidge based on what the projected caseloads were. But as an example, we have 3 students at Spring Street School. 2 are from Central America. 1 is from Ukraine, who are non-English speaking students that we need to provide services for. And those are students who are not on our projected caseload. So we're definitely going to have to provide some more services at Spring Street. And whether we can reallocate or we need to actually add some more, that remains to be seen. But I'll certainly keep the committee updated.
Great. Well, thank you very much for the comprehensive opening. It certainly has been positive in my house, so thank you. I think we can move on to our next agenda item, and that is an update on school facilities, as was already mentioned. So I'd certainly welcome some of our colleagues here from the Public Buildings Division, and I think Mr. Collins as well is joining us. I know Mr. Keith Baldinger is joining, but I know there's some other gentlemen with him, so I welcome you. All of you who want to come on up and share an update about all the summer work that has been going on. I noticed in one of Dr. Sawyer's pictures some very, very shiny gym floors that children were sitting on, and I know you're part of that. So I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mrs. Heffernan. If I could just briefly make a couple comments, then turn over to Mr. Baldinger. First and foremost is that the summertime is a very busy time for the school district and for various town departments. It's typically sometimes referred to in terms of repairs and maintenance of schools, the summer slam, because that's when you have about 8 weeks of opportunity where the schools, most of the schools are not fully occupied. So there's a lot to cram into a short period of time, and Mr. Baldinger will go through those details. Also at the same time is a number of different summer programs that we were fortunate to be able to run at the new Beale School with climate control. And I know the school committee is going to hear a detailed report at your next meeting on that topic. And then thirdly is just, in terms of big bucket things is, preparing for the school opening this fall. And everybody's involved in that, from, school-based administrators and secretaries to getting school and classroom rosters going, to HR in terms of the enormous amount of hiring in a very short period of time. But that's just kind of a lead into the fact that we work, here in Town Hall with a variety of different town departments to prepare our schools and our operations for each school opening. And maybe unbeknownst to many folks, but the building inspector's office, along with the fire department, does a detailed walkthrough of all of our schools to make sure all the life safety systems are operating and make sure the school buildings meet all of our building codes for egress. And myself and Mrs. Yu participated in those walkthroughs. Those are on the ground. Those are not paper drills. Those are, a dozen, 15 people at a time, all walking through the building to ensure that it's safe for staff and students to return. Certainly in connection with all the hiring is working with the town benefits office. We get great support from them for our employee benefits, our accounting and treasurer's office for all the business functions, the town manager's office, and then certainly the police department. And our interactions go not only to the required minimal annual meeting with the chief, but almost daily, weekly interactions with the police department, a number of fronts. And they provided a lot of additional police details, traffic details for us for the first week of school opening to support and get people back into the mode of where, what the pathways are to travel, to drop off your child or pick up your child, or all the additional traffic that we saw and experienced. So a lot of kudos to the police department. And so With that, again, probably I just wanted to mention all those departments because they're key players in helping us open up and have a smooth opening. But certainly the lion's share of the work falls to public buildings. And so at this point, I want to turn it over to Mr. Baldinger, who is the newly promoted to Assistant Director of Public Works. Congratulations. Well deserved. And he has this report that I'll help just click through some slides here, and he'll talk about what happened in the summer and the staff that supported it.
All right, well, thanks for having us here tonight. Nice to be back. Your faces haven't changed, but there's some new ones on this side. So this is Bill Tuttle. He's the new Public Buildings Division Manager, and here you go. And I'm out. So Bill has been with us since last April as our Assistant Division Manager of Maintenance. He came to us from Sterling DPW. He's the director over there. He's been terrific, great addition. And so we promoted him to this new position the first week of school. So far, he's still coming back, so it's good. So this is essentially my last with you, so in this role. So next year it'll be Bill. So I want to thank a few people tonight before I go on into our update. So my new role brings me, so I'm in charge of operations for public buildings, highway, parks and cemetery, and fleet maintenance. So all of those groups touch schools in some way. So I'm still involved, I'm still here. But the people on the board over here really make my job super easy and, make public buildings what it is. And the person that's not on the board actually is Angela Snell, who was moved. She is now the director of Parks and Recreation. And really, Dr. Sawyer talked about communication with our group, and she was the driver of that from day one. So I can't say enough about her help and guidance over the past almost 4 years, actually. So then we have Bill here, who we just talked about, and then somebody who's not here tonight. He had a family emergency. Ken Goodwin, who's our Assistant Division Manager of Custodial Services. He is in charge of all the cleaning. I don't think he slept much in 2020 or 2021, but he's terrific in that role. He's in charge of all our custodians. And then back here we have Bob Marchand. He's been the plant manager at the high school for about 6 years now. Been with us 7, I believe, and he has now moved into Bill's former role as Assistant Division Manager of Maintenance. And then somebody else who's not here tonight, who it says to be determined, his name is Joel Manzi. He's currently our plumber, and tomorrow he'll be our Assistant Division Manager at the high school. He's been with us about 6 years too, terrific guy. And then somebody else in the back here, we have John Hamilton. He is our night custodial supervisor. That's a new position that we put in place this past year. He works directly for Ken, and he's in charge of all the contract cleaners at night. Like I said, he's been here since December. The role and John himself have been great, and we really see it in our buildings on cleanliness and maybe stuff that you don't see, but stuff that we see. So it's been much better. So we also have 5 maintenance craftsmen. Well, now 4 because we have this position that's open, but and 15 custodians, and these are really the people that make all this happen for us. We have a great group of people. Like, they're truly the people behind the curtain, and they don't get appreciated enough for what they do, and so I have to call them out. And then this year we had 2 retirements. One early in the year, Paul Fox, who's a maintenance craftsman, who's with us for 35 years, and then Bruce Anderson, who was the custodian, most recently the custodian at Coolidge, was with us for 35 years. And he is the only custodian that's worked in every building in town in his career. So it's pretty neat. So we can get into the projects now. So here's Sherwood Middle School. On the left, you'll see a bottle filler. So this building has 6 of us. 6 of them. Over the past year, we've changed all of them out. They're about a $5,000 item, and our staff did the full install, which required tile work and plumbing and electrical. And we've actually really, I don't think we have a building left now that doesn't have a bottle filler in it. We have a few bubblers still left, but most of them have been changed out over the past couple of years. On the right is the Sherwood Gym, which is now 10 years old. So we refinished that this summer, and came out great. And that was about a $25,000 project. We have one, so 2 years ago we did oak. Next year we'll do floral, so that'll get all of our gym floors in good shape.
I do just want to mention with the bottle fillers, they're very much appreciated by all the schools. They are in all the schools now, and a great addition. They were starting to go in, I think, pre-pandemic. It's great to have chilled water. This is from the bottle filler over here.
Yep.
And staff and students appreciate it. Many staff and students bringing in their own water bottle every day. And it's great that it's chilled. And it's the bonus factor of having, you know, especially during COVID, to, you know, kind of reduce transmission and kind of take that concern away, is having a bottle filler and not students touching something and putting their mouth over it. So it's more hygienic as well. So very much appreciated.
Great. Here we have the Oak Middle School. So on the left, you see the cafeteria, which all that VCT tile was just replaced. You may recognize some colors from another building that we have, because we stole a bunch of attic stock. But the building over the past 2 years had shown a problem with a single color in the building. So we have trouble with the white tile. And so we've done a few small areas. We did outside the auditorium last year, and then did this over the summer. And we think it looks terrific. I think it's a much more updated look than what was there. But we were fortunate with a great contractor on that one. On the right, you'll see something that came out of a security walkthrough. We call this the Dr. Jones Jungle Gym, because that's where the people can access the roof. So we had this fence installed this year, so it's now locked. And then the gas company, we worked with the gas company and the fire department to make sure this is okay. They know where the key is and all that stuff. So, yep, next. So this is Floral Street School. This is the first floor. We did all of the carpet on the first floor in the classrooms. This is part of our 5-year plan to replace all the carpet. So far, we have the second floor left and one wing on the third floor, and then the media center. So hopefully within the next 2 years, we'll have all that complete. This is Parker Road Preschool. If any of you walked through the 35-year-old carpet that used to be in there, it was pretty rough. So we had that done. We did this in July of this year, and that also required asbestos removal, because it was asbestos tile underneath all of that, all of those areas, and it was about a $50,000 project. We had 2 terrific contractors on that, did a nice job, and then our staff went in and they painted a bunch of the hallways and offices and stuff like that, while it was empty. And our staff did all the moving of all the furniture and replacing it, working with the staff members to get it right. So it came out good. This is Shrewsbury High School, and you probably wouldn't notice this unless I told you. We replaced all of the lighting in the classrooms over the summer with LED lighting. And it actually worked out terrific, because sometimes when you go from LED lighting or from fluorescent to LED, people struggle with the colors, but so far we're getting positive feedback, so that's good. This is about a $98,000 project. It will save us about $17,000 a year in electricity and about $3,000 in maintenance. So it's a significant amount it's a building that has a $21,000 a month electric bill, so it's pretty significant for us. And with this project, we don't have we're well over half the building has been converted to LED. We have hallways left, some administration area, and a few other, in the auditorium, and a couple other spots that need to be replaced, but we're getting there. This is another project at the high school we did over the summer. So this is a guidance wing. Sorry about the photos, but we created 2 offices for adjustment counselors that you have added to your staff this year. The one on the left is a completely new office, and the one on the right is a conference room that we split in 2. You'll notice there are no doors on them, because currently glass is a problem with lead times. So we've been waiting about 6 weeks for these doors that have glass in them. We ordered the same types of doors in the spring for work here, and they only took 2.5 weeks. So, and it's a real weird glass issue right now.
If I could just interject also that, I know Dr. Sawyer mentioned earlier the pre-K through 12 space study. And just as a reminder, mostly for the community, that this school, which was opened in 2002, was designed for 1,475 students. We're likely going to be showing you October 1 numbers of probably just over 1,900 at Shrewsbury High School. And as a result of that, and as a result of the necessity and desire to add more staff, adjustment counselors, and support staff, we need to keep cannibalizing existing spaces within the infrastructure. So this used to be the guidance conference room. So they have lost the functionality of that space of small group meetings amongst their own department or with parents, and we have to switch the use now to office space. And that's happening and has happened throughout the years, throughout the entire building of Shrewsbury High School. So this is just another good example of that, with pictures, and really appreciate the work to make sure, by public buildings, to make sure that it's suitable, occupiable space that meets all of the building codes as well. That's just another tricky part of this, is it's not just putting up partition walls and doors. There's a lot more with respect to utilities and things like that. So I just wanted to make sure folks were aware of that.
And it's interesting working with staff administration and our designer too. We're really coming up with some creative ideas for safe places to put offices like this. We're not sticking people in closets and stuff like that. So it's actually, it works. It's a good collaborative effort.
Okay.
This is another. So on the left, this is really a behind-the-scenes thing that probably none of the public ever see. Those are the high school boilers on the left. They're about 8 feet tall and about the length of a pickup truck. You can barely see the second door, a gentleman's legs that's working on them, so they're quite large. And this is, they're being cleaned for preventive maintenance for the winter. In 2021, we started service. In 2020, we started service contracts on our largest boilers at the high school, Oak, Floral, and high school Oak and Floral. And we ended up with almost no heat days, no flameouts with boilers. So in 2021, we now have service contracts on all 22 of the boilers that we have in town. And some of those boilers are about the size of your washing machine, so they're not, but this is the largest we have. So we spend about $60,000 a year on service contracts for that. We have a great partner in Elanco Service Corp that helps us out with this and gets it through. And then on the right, it's really just a photo of the east entrance to the high school, and we did all the mulch work outside this year. And it's kind of our one of our new priorities is really improving the curb appeal and the outside of our buildings. We spend a lot of time and money on the inside of our buildings and sometimes neglect the outside. So over the next few years, that's one of our priorities, to start doing that. So that's it for me. That's my report. So any questions, feel free.
If I could just add 2 other points before the questions. One is, and I don't know if you have any data, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but what was highlighted is project work, not all the dozens or hundreds or whatever of just ongoing maintenance and repair projects that occur every summertime. These were the major items that received the biggest kind of investment and were different than other summers. So there's a lot more other work that happens as well. And the second point that I wanted to make and just make a note of is that also during the summertime, unrelated to public buildings but also coordinated very closely, there was a lot of work done with respect to supporting our summer programs that was managed by April Yu, the Assistant Finance and Operations Manager. So I just wanted to give her kudos because we were still, this summertime, demobilizing from COVID-19. And so we were still emptying tractor trailers from Shrewsbury High School. I think we had 2 or 3 that we had to still empty of furniture. We hired 4 summer laborers to help clean and power wash with the support of public buildings equipment and what have you, to put some of that equipment back into schools, and then also to empty out and return to the vendor 40-foot storage containers at Coolidge, Floral, and Spring Street schools. So thanks to her and all of her coordination and of our summer laborers who are mostly just high school and college age students who did great work during the summertime. So with that, of course, the highlight tonight really is around the public buildings, but I just wanted to make mention of that as well.
Well, thank you, and Mr. Baldinger, congratulations on your new role. We're very excited to work with you, Mr. Tuttle, and thank you, gentlemen, for being with us tonight. I understand one of you is a night supervisor, but the other is here at 8 p.m.
Yes, get back to work shortly. So.
So we certainly appreciate the partnership here is just incredible. But let me see if my colleagues have any questions or comments. Please, Ms. Fritz.
I just want to publicly congratulate you, Keith, on your promotion. Very well deserved. I've had the pleasure of working with you on the Bill Building Committee, always steering us in the right direction, making sure we were on task. So you do a lot of other things on top of what you do all day, the police building committee as well. So thank you for everything that you do. And I think Dr. Sawyer made that comment. Some of our buildings are 20 plus years old. They still look new and they're always immaculately clean. So thank you to everybody who's doing all of that. You can come in here at any time or any building and they're so well maintained. And I think that's the pride we have in our community and the taxpayers' dollars. So thank you.
Thank you.
On a related note, I just want to say thank you to everyone who currently or who has ever worked for our public buildings department. We in Shrewsbury Public Schools and indeed the town have a history of extracting a lot more life out of our buildings than was intended at the time that they were designed or built. And while that's not necessarily always an ideal situation, the only reason it is an option for us is because they are so diligently and thoughtfully maintained. So thank you to everyone who has ever been a part of that, because you have been a part of this department, jerry-rigging some solutions from time to time.
Yeah, just to add to that, thank you all for your contributions to making our schools successful, really, not just for back to school, which really impacts morale and just the comfort level for our staff and our students, but just year round, just keeping our buildings maintained and clean, and especially over the last couple of years. It's been very impressive. I'm always impressed with the annual presentations on what's been done over the summer, so thank you so much.
Thank you.
I certainly, as a somebody trying to decide whether I should replace all the lights in my home, am awestruck by that figure of what our electric bill is at the high school and what you just save in maintenance alone. And so I'm sure you're looking at all the different ways we can invest smartly. I don't know how you found more space at the high school. I can't even imagine. Cutting a room in half, as you mentioned, sort of sounds easy until you need to think about the lights and the sprinklers and the access and the egress and all of the other things that I'm sure you're thinking about. And I am, for those who have not been at the high school when 1,900 students are in it and staff, I'm in awe. So thank you, but thank you really for all of the work that you're doing here. It's really, and as my colleagues have mentioned, such an incredible partnership, and we are in your debt. Dr. Sawyer.
Thank you. I want to welcome Bill to his new role and congratulate Bob on his promotion as well. He's done an excellent job. Bob has as the plant manager at the high school for the last many years, to your point. Ms. Heffernan, it's a very complex building to work with. Ken Goodwin, who couldn't be here tonight, was a John Collins Award winner from the Shrewsbury Education Foundation, recognized for his excellent work, especially over the course of the pandemic. And certainly John, I've heard just excellent things about being able to really leverage the work that we have from an outside contractor. It's always been a point of frustration because they're not folks who work directly for the town, and sometimes there's some turnover there, so that's been a really a smart move to create that position, and John's doing really good work with it. We'll look forward to welcoming Joel Manzi into his new role at the high school, and I'm sure he'll do a terrific job. But I do also want to congratulate Keith on his promotion and thank you for the work you've done over the time since you became the head of Public Buildings Division. The collaboration and the communication, which literally are core values of our school district. I think you exemplified those, and it's always been just such a high degree of confidence of the quality of the work and the commitment to doing the work well, and whether that's responding to something that's urgent or thinking strategically about how we can do things better. We've seen that all along. So thank you, and look forward to working with you in your new role. And certainly thanking Mr. Collins and Ms. Yu and their department for helping on the school department side of things coordinate everything. It is a very condensed, intense time period over the summer in particular, and the schools are in as good a position as they can be as far as maintenance and cleaning to start our year off, and so we appreciate that.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you all very much. Hope you have a
Thank
lovely
you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Have a good night.
I somehow think we're going to see you again. Okay, and we're going to move to our final time scheduled appointment, and this is on student access to vocational technical education. We have both an update, a discussion, and a potential vote. And just as some background for those tuning in June of 2021, the Massachusetts Board of Elementary and Secondary Education voted several changes to the regulations governing how technical high school students admit students, with the goal of providing more equity in admissions. These and subsequent changes by the Assabet Valley Regional Technical High School admissions policy resulted in providing access to students from Assabet member communities prior to any students from non-member communities. Shrewsbury is not a member of the Assabet Valley Regional Technical High School District. And at a December 2021 school committee meeting, Dr. Sawyer and Mr. Collins discussed those regulatory changes and their expected impact, and provided information about the governance structure and membership for regional technical high school districts. Tonight, we did receive multiple documents in our package. Those are certainly available on the website. I think we're here to get an update regarding various actions that the district has taken on this issue in partnership with the town, and to look forward to next steps. And potentially, we might be taking a vote later this evening to discuss the possibility of engaging in dialogue with Assabet Valley about joining the district. So maybe before we get to that, let's get a status update about where we are. Dr. Summer,
Sure.
over to you or Mr. Collins?
I'm just going to, if you can move one slide forward, Mr. Collins, and I'll give a quick overview of what we'll be talking about. We will talk about the enrollment history and the impact this year. We'll talk a little bit more in detail about the member, non-member community issue, the policy changes around admissions, actions that we have taken specifically around this issue, and I can talk a little bit about some more broad things as well. And then we'll provide some specific data. The school committee had asked us to provide information around, was there a concentration of Shrewsbury students in particular programs at Assabet or not, and then what happens when students, after they graduate, which we don't have specific Shrewsbury data, but we have Assabet data and statewide data on that. But with that, let me just, I'll turn it over at this point to Mr. Collins, and he'll talk about the enrollment statistics and history.
Thank you, Dr. Sawyer. So first and foremost, and this is, I know, some repeat information for the school committee, but maybe a good reminder for the community at large. This is our enrollment history by grade level at Assabet Valley Regional Technical High School. So you're seeing 11 years of history back to the 2011-2012 school year, where in total, grades 9 through 12, we had 132 students enrolled at Assabet. And that pattern remained fairly consistent, a little bit of a dip in 16, 17, and going down a little bit there. And then you can see 21, 22, in the current year, 22, 23, I highlighted in red the freshman class, because this is really where the impact occurs with this admissions policy change. So where in the past we had anywhere from 25 to 40 students in grade 9 enroll, last school year we had 15. In this school year we have 1. And so you can see, you can just kind of forecast what the issue will be here. Of course, going forward the next 3 years, we could have 3 to 5 at the most students at the school entirely. We've got a long history there of strong enrollment, and now, obviously, that has changed, and we just wanted to kind of bring some of the enrollment factors to the forefront with that. This is basically just a chart showing the same thing in the kind of precipitous drop-off here since 2021 school year to where we are right now at the 64 students total. In terms of this idea of being a member of ASABIT or not being a member, really goes back into the history of Massachusetts regional vocational schools, where many of them, there's 26 or 27 of them dispersed regionally throughout the state. Many or most of them were formed in the 1960s and 1970s with some federal support dollars. And back at that time, it's believed that communities basically had an option to form up on a regional basis and see if surrounding communities wanted to form a regional school for the purposes of providing vocational technical education. And at the time, Shrewsbury did not join ASABIT, which is the nearest school in terms of a regional school. We do know that at the time, Shrewsbury students who were interested in that form of education would go to Worcester Vocational High School. And I think when I reported to you, I know it was last school year, I believe, that just anecdotally, when I began in this work in 1996, that we still had a handful of students who were Shrewsbury High School or Shrewsbury residents who were enrolled in Worcester Vocational High School in their plumbing program. Because at the time, ASABIT did not have a plumbing program. We were sending many students to ASABIT, but we still had a handful going to Worcester Voc. We would buy them WRTA passes, and that would be their transportation, and they would attend the plumbing program there. So really, I think when Shrewsbury was a much smaller community, and Worcester Vocational had space available, which it does not now, and frankly, vocational education did not have the same demand. It was easy for Shrewsbury to send its students to Worcester Vocational High School. So I think that's probably the main reasons why Shrewsbury did not join ASABIT, that the need was being met, if you will. So who are members of ASABIT Valley Regional Technical High School? You can see it's Berlin, Hudson, the city of Marlborough, Maynard, Northborough, Southborough, and Westborough. So they're all considered members of that regional school district. And other communities have sent students as non-resident students in addition to Shrewsbury. So other surrounding communities include Clinton, Leicester, West Boylston at a time was sending students. And that's really been kind of on a space available basis to ASABIT Valley Regional High School. When things started to change and ASABIT was really developing its programs, ASABIT became the quote-unquote preferred program. Eventually, they did get a plumbing program, and we stopped sending students to Worcester Voc. And the school committee and the district had this preference, if you will, that for all of our students interested in that form of education, that they would apply to for enrollment at ASABIT as out-of-district students. So that's how we send our students there. They're considered so-called out-of-district in terms of the formal piece, and that we do pay an annual tuition. This year's tuition per student, $17,234, and that is basically a state-regulated operating cost. It does not include capital costs. We know that ASABIT went through a $64 million renovation project several years back, and those capital costs, net debt, are not implicit in that $17,000. It's really just the member communities who borrowed the money, sold the bonds, and have to pay off that annual debt service. And just as a side note, I would mention that while we call them out-of-district students at ASABIT, having worked there, The students who are enrolled there, they don't know any difference. They're not treated any differently. They have the same access to all the programs. It's not a thing. It's just they're all Assabet Valley High School students. But in terms of how things get paid, that's kind of the formal terminology. And I'll turn it back to Dr. Soar at this point.
Thank you. And so, as Ms. Heffernan mentioned in introduction, there was and we reported last year, there was a significant state policy change that was made to state regulations around vocational technical admission with the goal of creating more equitable access. There had been longstanding complaints in certain parts of the state that students who could be able to or would access wanted to access vocational technical, that schools have become quite selective because the state regulations allowed for vocational technical programs to utilize students' academic performance, their attendance, their discipline record, whether and basically on a point system, and they would offer admission based on sort of a ranking of students. And by creating those ranking systems, students who were from either member communities who didn't meet those criteria didn't get in. That created some policy pressure there. And additionally, the sense that some students who in middle school may not be as successful and may not be doing as well academically or having some issues would actually benefit from the vocational technical type of education, and those students were being shut out. Unfortunately, the reality is that because there's only so many seats and a much higher degree of demand, because our vocational technical education system in Massachusetts is considered to be the best in the nation, and there are a lot of families and students who want this type of education, there just simply aren't enough seats on a statewide level. And so the impact of this policy change has essentially been to shift the issue of sort of a musical chairs type of situation from where many member community students, as well as certainly there were Shrewsbury students over time who wanted to go to Assabet and were not admitted because of their selectivity. And now, because those selectivity pieces have essentially been taken out, the state requirement that member community students have preference over non-member community students means that virtually every incoming ninth grader from member communities will get admission. So in a school like Assabet, where there's more demand than there are seats from their member students, it had the impact of shutting non-member communities like Shrewsbury out. And so as you see, they've gone through their wait list, and now there's one Shrewsbury student who's been taken off the wait list, which is done by lottery. Again, not ranking by grades or anything else, unless a student had essentially been, had suspensions or expulsions, or was not going to pass 8th grade. Those are really the only criteria now in terms of acceptance, other than a pure lottery. First in district or in member students, and then secondary lottery for non-member community students. In terms of the options that we've been working on, and this is specifically around this policy in particular, and looking at what we could do as a school district, as a community, because essentially, as you see underscored there, I'm sorry, I'll get to that in a moment. That's the next page. We did meet with Senator Moore and Representative Kane last June as we were looking at, how could we look at some state support for this. We then followed up with a meeting with the Commissioner of Education for the state, Jeffrey Riley, and some of his staff, along with Representative Kane. Senator Moore couldn't make it, so a representative from his office came, Ms. Heffernan as the chair of the school committee, and I, to discuss the issue, potential options, what other avenues that the Department of Education could provide for us. The school committee did send a letter to the state board, just making them aware of the likely unintended consequences of their admissions policy change, and that is in your packet, and that's posted we post on the website tomorrow if people are interested in looking at that. So those are a few things that we did. If you go to the next slide, the other piece is exploring this possibility of the town of Shrewsbury joining the Assabet Regional District. And I want to be really clear, it is not the school district that joins a regional technical school district, it's the town or city. So next door, it's not the Westboro Public Schools who are a member of Assabet, it's the town of Westboro is a member of Assabet, which has a separate governing school committee with representatives from each of their member communities. Recently, Mr. Collins and I participated in a call with a representative from DESE, who's in charge of vocational technical education, about different options. And then I know this evening you'll discuss is, and last night the Board of Selectmen voted to authorize sending a joint letter from Chair Mr. DiPaolo and Chair Ms. Heffernan to the Assabet School Committee itself, requesting consideration for a process for the potentiality of Shrewsbury joining as a member community, and that's something I know the committee will want to discuss further. But in addition to that, before I turn it back over to Mr. Collins to talk a little bit about the graduate data, I think what's important, and to talk about what the process is to go to member district, there are a variety of other things that we have been working on, both in advance of this change at the state level for all of our students relative to our strategic planning, and that we are further emphasizing as a result. I know that Ms. Minton, when she spoke earlier, was talking about Dr. Lizotte reaching out to area businesses around internships and job shadowing. We did some of that last year, even though Dr. Lizotte was, her full-time job was acting principal at Patton, continued to do some of this work. You may recall that Dr. Lizotte and some others reported to the committee last spring about a variety of things that we had done. There was a career exploration pathways, job shadowing internships that we launched last year with a variety of local businesses of all types. There was a career and trade fair that was held for the first time at Shrewsbury High School, where folks from the area, including some Shrewsbury High alumni, who were in a variety of professions, where students who chose a different pathway than going to college, into often small businesses or different things, and there were some other areas there like mass hire to provide information. And then in addition, we did, in partnership with Worcester State University, launch an early college program last year. We had students from Shrewsbury High School duly enrolled in a business course at Worcester State as well as a finance course at Worcester State. That is, I know that Ms. Minton mentioned Innovation Pathways. That's one of the main elements of Innovation Pathways is an early college type piece. So we have begun that programming already, which was in the works before the Assabet admission policy changed, but by all means, we should continue to explore all of our options in that direction as a result. So there has been work that the district has been doing for any and all students in Shrewsbury, particularly at the high school level, around these pieces, but we know because of the disappointment that students who otherwise would have been attending Assabet no longer have that option in this freshman class of 2026. It's incumbent on us to look and find more opportunities and options. And as we do our strategic planning work this coming fall, I'm sure that will be a key thread for us to be working on. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Collins. You can talk a little bit more about the process of joining the Assabet district, and then talk a little bit about the data for students who graduate.
Thank you. So in terms of joining, as I put here in the first bullet point, it is a lengthy process. I probably should have used the word very difficult as well. And it's not like a singular person or a singular entity's decision to make, because we're talking about a regional school district with 7 different members that have a contract or a so-called regional agreement that guides things like new members, and I'm going to get into that a little bit. So, as Dr. Sori mentioned, this is not a school district, school committee decision. It's really obviously on our end as an entity wanting to join. It would have to be the town of Shrewsbury. And then on the receiving end, Assabet Valley Regional Technical High School has its own school committee. And I know this bullet point says majority. It really ought to say 2/3. So 2/3 of the Assabet Valley Regional Technical High School School Committee needs to vote affirmatively to move forward to change that regional agreement in a way that will allow for a new member community to join. And as I talk about these steps, just think about the incentives and the motives of the committee if you were not members of Shrewsbury, but you were members of Assabet, and what you might be thinking about adding a new member when you've got 7 other member constituent communities who already have more students who want to attend your school than you can currently allow. So typically, they allow about 900 students. They have a capacity for about 900 students to enroll for grade 9. And I'm told that their applications were north of 500 in total for this incoming class. So, you know, we need to be thinking about what their motives might be to say, sure, let's have another member and have, even kind of more complicated mix, if you will, of who is first prioritized and second prioritized. So it is certainly complicated. But that's the first step. The school committee would need to have a 2/3 vote to say, yes, let's entertain this, and let's move this forward then to each of our 7 member communities and ask them to affirmatively vote to allow a new member into our region. And for that regional agreement to be changed, you need 100% vote. So, and this would occur at each of the member communities' town meetings or city council meetings. So they obviously don't occur at the same time. They, might be taken up as in different town meetings. But if, for example, you got a yes in Berlin and then you move to Hudson and Hudson said no, then the process stops because you need 100%. Or if you got through all 6 towns and then you went to the city council and the city council was going to be the 7th vote and they said nope, then it's a no-go. So it's a very high threshold, very difficult process to quote-unquote join the district because of the mechanisms that are in place. So that's that topic. A separate topic, shifting gears a little bit, is this is some data that I know school committee members were interested in, which is, so what do our students do? What do Shrewsbury students do when they enroll at Aspen Valley Technical High School? Now, this data is for just students in grades 10 through 12 who started this school year. And this is the distribution across 16 different technical programs or shops that Assabet has. And you can see there's students in every single one of those 16 shops. So it's not as if, another way to say this, it's not as if like Shrewsbury students prefer X because they're in all 16 programs. And the incoming freshman process, now we only have 1 freshman there, but in terms of process, when the school year starts, freshmen have to engage in a so-called exploratory program between September and December. And they explore for a week 6 different shops. And they get to choose which 6 they want to explore. And then after that period of time has elapsed between September and December, and of course they're only in shop 1 week, and then the next week they're in academics. So that's why it takes from September to December to get through this process. But then they will then rank what shop they would like to be in. So it's not as if you get to enroll in Assabet and pick, I want this, and that's what you get. You have to kind of vie for that, if you will, and there's enrollment caps for each of the shops. And so you rank your top 3 choices, and then based upon your level of interest and how you're performing, not only in your exploratory week and the interest that you showed in your academics, then choices are made about which students get into which shop. And of course, they try to enroll as many students as possible into their first choice, but certainly some students get second choice, and unfortunately some students get third choice. I don't think too many do, but some get third choice. So that's just another happening, if you will, for students that enroll at Assabet. It's not as if you get to just pick your program when you go. And there's certainly benefits to that exploratory program because kids don't know what they don't know, right? And people don't know what they don't know. So that's the purpose of exploring and getting a little bit more hands-on experience in 6 different technical programs. Moving on to some postgraduate follow-up data. So all of the vocational and technical schools are required to conduct postgraduate surveys. There's a lot of federal funding that's involved in providing vocational technical education, and part of the federal regulations are that students are tracked in a very discrete manner in terms of what they're doing post-graduation. And so this is statewide data for the class of 2021. And it's taken about 12 months after graduation. And again, this is statewide. This is not Assabet specific, but you can see that of all the graduates across the state, that 50% are furthering their education, either 2 or 4 year college programs or other further technical programs or so-called apprenticeship educational programs. So that's 50%. 1/3 or 33% go right directly into employment in a field related to their high school technical program. 12% are employed in a field unrelated to their high school technical program. So it might be a student who was in, who knows, computer programming and web design, and now they're working in, retail hospitality, or working in some other different field that was unrelated to computer programming. 3% are serving the armed services, and 2% were unemployed as of this 2021 data. So I do think it's valuable to just point out that there, and this might be a little bit of myth busting for some folks, that there is not the strongest correlation between what students take up as their technical program in their high school career and then what they're doing as a postgraduate. It's only about 1/3 based upon this 2021 data. And of course, that's understandable, right? That all of us who have or are raising children, these students are, 15 years old when they're making these choices to pick up what shop that they might be interested in. And so not everybody's, so prescient at the moment to know exactly what their career is going to be, or even what their postgraduate work or plans might be. So that we thought that was important information to share as well. And so with that, I'll turn it back to Dr. Sawyer, who I know has a couple of closing comments.
Thank you. So I hope the information was helpful to the committee, and I know you want to discuss empowering Ms. Heffernan to send a letter to explore the possibility of whether the Assabet School Committee will be interested in potentially partnering with Shrewsbury as an additional member. But the overall piece is, as we stated at different times last year when we became aware and or grappling with this change in admissions, the situation it's not a good situation for Shrewsbury kids. It's very unfortunate that kids who otherwise would have had an opportunity to go to a terrific vocational technical high school are not because of this policy change. And it is certainly incumbent upon us to make sure that this group of students in the class of 2026, as well as other students who may be more inclined to either take a different pathway or learn some little bit more of a hands-on type way, have opportunities. There's lots of challenges with that. State programming usually requires about a year-long, if not more, process to get either funding or in some of these positions, whether those are innovation pathways or early college or similar things. But there are things that we've started to do over the past couple of years, I mentioned earlier, that we'll continue to expand upon with Dr. Lazat back in her job full-time. That's a major focus of hers. And we need to consider what opportunities are. In conjunction with that, as we sort of referenced in the last report, we have another restricting factor, and that's the fact that we have no space at the high school. It's all the space is occupied. So without adding space, in terms of adding programming becomes very, whether that's an elective in the English department or a new course that might be appealing to students who otherwise would have gone to Assabet. With the caveat, again, that as we've stated multiple times over the past many months, it is not within our capacity as a school district to replicate a vocational technical education. It's just not a reality that we're going to be able to provide. But there may be different things we can do, and looking at, obviously without space, looking at off-site kinds of things as potential opportunities. These are all things that we'll be working towards developing, different options we might be able to fund or bring forward in the coming months and years to help address this issue. So with that, I'll turn it over to the committee for any questions or comments, and then ultimately a vote on sending a letter.
Thank you, Dr. Sawyer. I think we all know from town meeting and from other sources in the community, there are lots of feelings about where we are today. But why don't I open it up to some of my colleagues for any questions or discussion, and then we can move maybe to action. Yes, Ms. Schwartz, please.
I think it's important to also note, our summer workshop in August, we had an extensive conversation about ASAPIT. We probably talked maybe the longest about that, and this being an issue that we have going forward. And I know we can't replicate this process. We know that's not possible to replicate ASAPIT. But I think the first natural step is sending this letter to see what will they say. I mean, that's the first prong, and then we can move once we have that answer. And for me as a parent, my kids are out of school, but I think we always need to make sure we're providing opportunities for all students, regardless of what they want to do. And we've had a lot of conversation over the years. Not all students go to college, so what can we do to provide them with opportunities? And I think we need to look outside the box from what we've been doing. We're trying, but what else can we do that might provide hands-on trade, those experiences for students to see what they want to explore. And maybe they're not going to stay with it and study, but let's explore so that they can all become, working adults as we get older. So for me, it's one of the major things that we have a school committee as we move forward this year, and I think it does dovetail with the strategic priorities that we're going to be looking at.
Thank you. Yes, Jason.
I would echo Mrs. Fritz's comments. It is clear to me that this needs to continue to be a top priority for Shrewsbury Public Schools to explore creative solutions to this issue. Access to ASAPIT, though far from a guarantee, is something that families in this community have assumed access to, or the possibility of access to, for almost a generation now. And this relatively sudden change in state policy has taken away that option. As has been pointed out, we are a traditional K-12 district, and we are not going to be able to replicate the programming of a full Voc Tech program, in addition to not having the space, in addition to having still constrained financial resources. I look at the slide from Mr. Collins' presentation and the wide variety of programming available through ASAPIT. There are a lot of options there for students to take. It's not as if there's one or two or three programs that the vast majority of students are taking. It's not as if the creation of one elective or one course or one additional offering is going to fill the void that ASAPIT has left. So what do we need to do? I think it is incumbent upon us to continue to explore the option of Shrewsbury becoming a member district, however much of a lift that may be. And to reiterate, that's not a choice that this body gets to make. It will ultimately, it starts obviously with exploring whether or not ASAPIT's school committee is interested in welcoming us, and if they are, which is a question unto itself, but if they are, it becomes a decision for the entire town of Shrewsbury to make. But it is our responsibility, in my opinion, to engage the town of Shrewsbury in that discussion. And my time on the school committee and my time on town meeting, which is longer, we've never had that conversation in the community. We've never needed to. It's new territory for residents, but it is a conversation we absolutely need to engage the community in. And then I do want to take a moment to thank our state legislative delegation for their attention to this issue, because I do think it is important to note that at the end of the day, at the core of this, there is a state level policy problem. I understand the policy change was made because there was a group of students that the Commonwealth rightly felt should have access to seats at these schools. And so they made a change to give access to these kids, but instead of creating more opportunities for kids, they said to one group of kids, we're going to help you get access, and the cost of that was another group of kids lost access. That, to me, is a very incomplete solution that is more akin to paper pushing than it is really addressing the problem at hand. We do need expanded capacity in our state's vocational educational system. So I do want to commend our state legislative delegation for their work and their attention to this issue, and just remind everyone who has that power and that voice to communicate with the state level that at the end of the day, we do need at the state level an expansion of vocational capacity, because this should not be an issue of some kids get seats and other kids don't. We need to be finding solutions where kids who are interested in this program have access to it.
Thank you, Tracy.
Yeah, I agree with my colleagues. This is a big challenge. I know that's an understatement, but I think we're all pretty strong advocates for access to vocational opportunities. Very appreciative of the expertise that Mr. Collins brings to the table here as a former superintendent at Assabet. And I also always think about like what's within our control. In this case, really communication to our elected officials, to families, and to those that oversee the process, and to explain to the residents, where we are in that process and what we've done. And we've outlined that at least tonight, the actions to date, but also making the public aware of the opportunities that we're able to find within our district. Again, we're not going to be able to replicate it. It's impossible to do that. But there are some opportunities that we could create through partnerships with businesses, job shadowing, and things that we're starting to see materialize. Just overall transparency with kind of where we're at. And periodic updates, I think, are very important in this space.
Yes, please.
Yeah, I agree with everything that my colleagues have said, and I would fully support sending, the letter in connection with the Board of Selectmen. I think it's the next step that needs to be taken, and I would fully support moving in that direction.
Thank you. And I think I have a couple of thoughts about this. Clearly, there's not enough supply for a demand across the state, and I would posit to say across the nation for vocational education, and we are often held up as a state as being in the gold standard, and yet here we are with one freshman in the Assabet class, and if I have my facts right, he was enrolled in the last 2 weeks, right? So this is a change for that individual. I think I appreciate what do we control and what do we not control. I do think, Dr. Sawyer, it would be incumbent for you and Dr. Lozano and the other members of your team. These are big lifts to provide some updates to us throughout the course of the year about the other opportunities that we can be building as a district that make sense, that fit our strategic priorities. I absolutely agree. We have to be talking about this as we're talking about longer term planning, because there's no easy near term fix to all of this. When I think about the long term strategies, they increase in complexity and fiscal requirements, and some of the ideas that people have thrown out are really big numbers and really big asks for us as a community. But I think it's important also for people to know that Shrewsbury is not alone. There are over 90 towns in Massachusetts that are not a current member of a regional school district. We happen to be one of the largest in terms of that we're sending students on a tuition basis, and I'm pulling that from the fiscal 21 state data about the request for out-of-district vocational transportation funding, which never gets the funding that it should, but is a good way to say how much money are we requesting, how many kids are we sending. That's really based on the number of, one of the important factors, at least, the number of students that we're sending. And Shrewsbury's at the top of the list. We were sending lots of kids as an out of district and paying those tuition dollars, which I think we were getting a great benefit for doing. But the other districts, other towns around us that we're sending lots of kids include Clinton and Leicester and some of our other near-term colleagues. So I think that making the request to begin a conversation, this is many steps, is the right first step around joining Assabet. I've heard others suggest, whether on Facebook or others, like, let's just make our own regional district. And I think that sounds like an interesting idea, but I can barely begin to understand the cost nor the interest of other communities that they may or may not be of interest. And we know what it costs to build a building. We don't know what it costs to build a vocational building, though I'm sure we can get some estimates. But the state hasn't built one in a long time. Worcester is probably a great example, but that's now 15 years old. And so what that would look like. And I appreciate and completely agree with my colleague that there are state and federal considerations. The federal government was backing the initial push for vocational education, and the state has always been a key player here. So, I don't personally think that as a community we have enough interest to bear our own building. It would have to be regional, and so starting with Assabet makes some sense to me as a regional place to go. But I see a very complicated sort of decision flow chart for us as a community about, if this doesn't work, then what else? And I know there's going to have to continue to be conversations across the community about what to do next. And so I think the one thing we have before us tonight for consideration is that we do essentially ask about if they want to. We need two to tango. Are you interested? And so that in conversation with the chair of the select board, that we would jointly write letters as chairs of our co-boards, because again, really do appreciate this is a town decision, not a school committee decision, but to ask Assabet Regional Technical School Committee to ideally put this on a public meeting and then have a discussion with the town of Shrewsbury about the potential of joining their district. And so if those are interested, I would seek a motion in order to authorize me as the chair to finalize such a letter in partnership with our colleagues on the select board, and particularly with Chair DiPaolo. If I can get a motion?
I move the committee vote to authorize the chair to collaborate with the chair of the Board of Selectmen to send a letter to the Assabet Valley Regional Technical School Committee requesting to meet with them to discuss the option of the town of Shrewsbury potentially joining the district.
Second?
Thank you. Motion seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor can do so by signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Great, that passes unanimously. I think we will have this topic on our agenda, however, again, in the near future. So thank you very much, Dr. Collins. Mr. Sawyer, I'm sorry, I didn't ask if you had anything else.
No, it's
you
okay.
wanted to
Not at
add
all.
to that.
I think we're
Okay. All right. Then I will, if I can, move on to our next agenda item, and that is under new business, an annual report on bullying within the schools, and an update on some of our statistics. And this is part of the bullying prevention and intervention policy adopted in December 2010, that the superintendent shall report annually to the school committee regarding the frequency of bullying behaviors during the prior school year, and to update the committee about steps being taken to minimize such behaviors while promoting continuous improvement in learning environments. I know we did receive a report in our packet, and Dr. Sawyer, I will turn it over to you at this point.
Sure.
Thank you.
So as you mentioned, this is an annual required report, and it is somewhat narrow in scope in the sense that this came into being when the state law and policy came into effect in 2010 with regard to focusing on the issue of bullying. And the state gives a very specific legal definition of bullying, that they're behaviors that cause physical or emotional harm, but that they are repeated in terms of getting that designation in kind of a legal, formal sense. So I want to be very clear that although the number of formal bullying cases, in both allegations and those that were found to be qualifying, are very small relative to the size of our district. Obviously, we have many situations where students make poor choices, are unkind to one another, or do things that are not acceptable in terms of the standards of expectations for their behavior that we deal with on a regular basis. I think generally overall we have very positive school cultures and don't have to address these kinds of issues as frequently perhaps as some other places. But that said, and particularly over the last year, when students were coming back from the pandemic, we really did see a significant uptick in what we would say is generally unacceptable behavior among students, as students some struggled reacclimating to the expectations of a school environment. The good news is, as I reported earlier this year, there's definitely more of a sense that kids are on track in a much more typical place than they would be, whereas last year there was a perception that maturity levels had been hampered by having been out of school or in the hybrid model over the course of the 2 years are affected most by the pandemic. So with that, in terms of this past year, in terms of the formal statistics about bullying, there were 9 allegations of bullying at the elementary level. None of them were found to be qualifying as bullying. That's not to say they weren't found to be problematic or of concern and dealt with appropriately, but none of them were found to be qualifying in the sense that they were repeated. And sometimes allegations will be made because there's an incident that happens, and it may be, well, I believe this is bullying and I want you to investigate it, and it's our responsibility to investigate it and make that determination. At the middle school level, there were 6 allegations, 2 of which qualified as bullying. And at the high school level, there were 11 formal allegations, and of those, 2 officially qualified as bullying. With those at the middle level, there were, both incidents were one where there was 1 aggressor and 1 target. At the high school level, there were 2 targets and 6 total aggressors, so it was multiple students involved as aggressors in those cases. In terms of the, as that compares to the previous year, which again may have been skewed a bit because of the pandemic, so I want to be cautious about that. There had been very fewer allegations, even a total of 10 across the district compared to 26 last year, and only 1 had qualified at the middle school level. So, but again, that's a very much of an outlier year. In terms of the types of behaviors, in the middle level in the 2 situations involved either verbal or physical. They occurred at school. At the high school, both situations occurred at school, and they were involved verbal situations. One of the 2 middle school ones involved some physical, or both of them involved some physical issues, and one was verbal as well. Wanted to be, one thing that the school committee has asked about before, we did track race and ethnicity of those involved in these situations, both the allegations and those that were found to qualify. Given the small number, and the analogy I would use is given, just as the state does with MCAS results, when the number of students involved is small, we do not publicly report those just because of the potential for inadvertently identifying students by revealing those kind of characteristics. However, I want to assure the school committee that this is something, whether it's related to bullying or other disciplinary actions such as suspensions, looking at these demographic data is something that we're committed to doing to make sure that we are not seeing any disproportionate impact. To date, regarding the state statistics on suspensions, which have not been finalized based on what we reported last year, we have not been found to be disproportionate in terms of our disciplinary practices. Some districts across the state have, but that is something that we are continuing to monitor and pay attention to. In terms of actions we are taking to try to minimize behaviors that are hurtful or harmful among students, regardless of whether they would technically qualify as bullying or not, we're continuing to focus strongly on these themes of inclusion and belonging. We're providing a variety of social and emotional learning experiences, whether that's been the introduction of advisory programs at both the Oak and Shrewsbury High School level that are premised or predicated on the Character Strong program, although we do some things ourselves as well. The Purposeful People program at the elementary level. There's a social emotional learning groups at each level, in the elementary in particular, that have been involved with a variety of lessons that students are receiving. I know that one of the, I think it was the Floral Street newsletter this week, highlighted some work that they were doing along those lines with our elementary students. We know it's incredibly important work, and we want to be sure that we're doing everything we can to be proactive in terms of, establishing what the expectations are for appropriate behavior, supporting students in their emotional and social growth, and addressing inappropriate or harmful behavior and whenever we become aware of it in a way that makes sense, and with the goal of it not being repeated. Obviously, we're trying to teach kids how to behave appropriately when behavior is extreme, which is rare, thankfully, but when it is extreme, we will, as both the law requires and as is appropriate, we will involve law enforcement if necessary. But typically, we're dealing with this, on a disciplinary side with school administrators, and on a supportive side with adjustment counselors, school counselors, and the like. The other piece I would mention is that we do have a safety tip option that's on our website. If you're on the homepage, either for the district or for any of the schools, there's a flag right at the top of the page that says submit a school safety tip. We want to be sure that there's an opportunity for anonymous reporting in case there's a concern that someone wants to bring up and they're not comfortable bringing it forward for some reason. Obviously, we welcome phone calls or emails from parents or students if they have a concern. Of that tool, we had 14 reports submitted during the last school year. A few were related to allegations of bullying, kind of a general sense. They were all investigated and resolved to the extent possible based on the information that was provided. So that is a tool that is available to students and families if they wish. One of our goals, of course, and we know that the research supports very strongly, that when students feel that they have a trusted adult in the school that they can go to if they're having a concern or an issue, they're much more likely to report something that's happening that could be inappropriate or concerning or harmful, and whether that's something along the lines of bullying or even around school safety and security. So we are continuing to look at ways to monitor, our students and, who is it that their go-to person is? Are they known by their teachers or by their middle school team, by their, teachers at the high school level, whatever it might be. And our administrators have been working with our faculty around making sure that we're finding ways to reach out to students, especially those who might not be on our screen as much, to make sure everyone is connected to someone. So with that, that is the information, the data I have for this report, and I'd be happy to answer any questions the committee has.
Thank you, Dr. Sawyer. Any questions from my colleagues? And I would just, I certainly appreciate that probably the most important thing for us to know about bullying, in addition to creating appropriate cultures in our schools that don't in any way condone or support it, is that kids do have some adult that they can reach out to. I know we were looking at that at survey data at the end of last year. There's always opportunities to do more, but as we're on the other side of the pandemic, hopefully as kids get more engaged in more activities at the schools, they have more adults, whether it's their, in an allied arts, if it's not their, a teacher in a traditional, one of our core subject areas, or after school or sport. And so I think that's important. I would say, Dr. Sawyer, submit an anonymous tip on I appreciate how anonymous tips make it hard to investigate, certainly, but having the opportunity and making sure people are really aware of what that flag is maybe worthwhile as we're getting ready for curriculum nights and other such things, to tell parents, what is that little flag and what happens with that if you push that button, and you can tell us about something. But even for, certainly our older middle and high school students, to say, you don't want to tell everybody in the school you have a problem on the bus, but you can put something in here that tells us, and then we can, as adults, investigate it. So always opportunities to communicate maybe a little bit more and remind people of what's available to them. But thank you very much for the report this evening. Okay, our next item of new business is we have a vote on a successor contract for the Shrewsbury Educational Association Unit B. And good evening, Ms. Willen. Thank you for joining us. And so I know contract negotiations have been ongoing with the Shrewsbury Educational Association Unit B. That is our assistant principals and athletic director, and those have concluded. I understand Unit B voted to ratify their agreement on September 1st, and this being our first meeting thereafter, we're happy to take that up. And I want to thank my colleagues, Ms. Fritz and Mr. Wensky, who have been the representative for the school committee in this matter. But why don't I turn it over to you to share where we are at? She's taking the lead here. Go for it.
Sure. So I would also like to thank Mr. Wensky and Ms. Fritz, who devote a lot of time volunteering to participate in these negotiations with our various unions, and I really appreciate both of their commitment to do that. And we had an excellent negotiation with the assistant principals and the athletic director, who obviously is a very important role in our district. We agreed to cost of living increases of 3% for each of the three contract years. There's a small increase in the one-time 403B plan contribution educators receive at the beginning of their fourth year of employment. That matches exactly what was voted into for the teacher's contract as well. We also matched the teacher contract on changes in language, including leave of absence language and using gender-neutral pronouns throughout the contract. And then finally, an increase in the number of working days and salary for the athletic director, and that is to compensate for expanded athletic opportunities at the middle level and even the growth of the high school program, far more students participating. And the school committee wanted to recognize those efforts. Mr. Collins put together a chart which you have in your materials, and I know will be publicized on the website tomorrow. So the agreement is 1.4, 1.46, and 1.5 across the 3 years of the contract, one of our smaller groups. I believe that Dr. Sawyer had a conversation with Mr. Mizigar as well, so I'll let him speak to that. But I can answer any questions as well as Ms. Fritz and Mr. Wensky.
Do you want to take that?
Sure, well, just in terms of the, under state law, the town manager has an opportunity to vote on collective bargaining agreements, and Mr. Mizikar was not able to be here this evening, but he did communicate to me that he's reviewed all of the information, and although he's not able to be here to vote, he is in support of the ratification of the contract.
Thank you, Dr. Sawyer. And I wonder if I could turn it over to my colleagues who were in the room, so to speak, with any comments that you might have for us.
I'd like to thank you, Ms. Malone, for all of the work that you put in on these, as long as the Unit B team, which was Heather Globlaski, Karen Gutenkantz, and Jay Costa. I think the conversation that we had in the room helped us understand what they were looking for, and I think this contract does reflect the increase in duties as well as complexity that they're all facing. So it was a very, very easy contract negotiation.
Yeah, I agree. And in addition, Ms. Malone, thanks to Mr. Collins, too, for the financial guidance, and Dr. Sawyer as well. And the collaboration with Unit B has been exceptional. Their members are excellent, really provide amazing service to our schools, and really appreciate, again, the communication, the transparency, collaboration with them. Yeah.
And colleagues, any questions or discussion? And Dr. Sawyer, is there anything you'd like to add before I move to a vote?
I just want to thank all the members of this particular employee group. Everyone obviously had to step up and work in ways they'd never worked before over the last few years. The assistant principals are really critically important members of the school community at our two larger elementary schools and at our middle schools and our high schools. There's a wide variety of things they're responsible for. There's a lot of day-to-day, minute-to-minute things they have to respond to skillfully, and a whole host of other things that they're responsible for, outside of the day-to-day work with students. But I think over the last couple of years in particular, when I mentioned last year, a lot of our students are in really difficult times, and I appreciate the work that our assistant principals have done to balance the issue between what requires more of a disciplinary approach and what requires a supportive approach, and at the same time also doing the work of being educational leaders within our schools. So, obviously it was mentioned as well that the single other role, the athletic director role, that's a very big program in a very big district that provides a lot of opportunity for lots of our students, and get a lot of benefit out of that program. And Mr. Costa is known as not only a Central Massachusetts but a statewide leader in among athletic directors, and that experience and the work he does at that level benefits us as well. So I certainly support and recommend that the school committee ratify this agreement and thank them for their work.
Excellent. Well, I'm in wholehearted agreement. If I can then ask, if I may have a motion that the committee vote to approve the Shrewsbury Educational Association Unit B successor contract per the terms outlined in the memorandum of agreement, and that would be effective as of July 1, 2022, extending through June 30th, 2025.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. And all those in favor can do so by signifying with an aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? It passes unanimously. Thank you very much
Thank
for all of the work to many people who are not in the room here tonight for us to thank. Our next agenda item is an approval of minutes, and those are the minutes from the school committee workshop held on August 16th, 2022. Those were sent to the committee in advance. Would anybody have any comments or edits or changes to those minutes? If I can, then I'd ask that they be marked for approval. And we do need to go into executive session this evening before adjourning. I would like to request a motion that we adjourn to executive session for the purposes of addressing Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, 21A7, to comply with or act under the authority of any general or special law or federal grant and aid requirements, also known as Purpose 7, for the purpose of reviewing and approving and or releasing executive session minutes. Also for the purpose of addressing Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, 21A3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining and or litigation if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigation position of a public body and the chair so declares, known as Purpose 3, as relates to Shrewsbury Educational Associations, Units A and or B, the Shrewsbury Paraprofessional Association, and or the Cafeteria Workers Association. At the conclusion of executive session, we will return to open session only for the purposes of adjourning for the evening. May I have a
So moved.
motion?
Second?
Thank you. Having been moved and seconded, roll call vote is required. Ms. Fritz?
Aye.
Mr. Munski?
Aye.
Mr. Palich?
Aye.
Ms. Boucher?
Aye.
And myself, aye. Thank you all, and good night.